Hi there, I'm Beth, and today I'll be showing you how to make this dress for Blythe. I wanted to share a little of my pattern making process, so this time I'll be making it all up as I go. I started by drawing this sketch, making notes about the construction and details. I thought a basic one-piece top would work for the bodice, to which I can add slightly bell-shaped sleeves and a gathered skirt. I'll show you how to make this template for yourself, so grab some paper, a pencil and a ruler and scissors. This paper needs to be 11 by 8 centimeters. We'll fold it in half before cutting it out. Fold your paper so it's 5.5 centimeters wide and 8 tall. Draw a line along the center fold and make sure the bottom edge is squared and flat. Mine is a little longer, so I'll draw a line at the 8 centimeter mark. Drawing only on the right side of the fold, I make marks at 5 and 8 centimeters from the bottom on the right edge, and one at 8 centimeters on the center line. I draw a line to make my box 8 by 5.5. From the top right corner, I make a mark at 3 centimeters in. From the top left, I mark half a centimeter in, and again a little further down, to make a line a few centimeters long. I join these marks with a line. Then mark 3.5 centimeters in from the bottom left. I join these marks with a line. Next, I mark on the center line 2.5 centimeters from the bottom. And on the short line here, I mark 2 centimeters from the top. Sorry for my big head. I join these marks with a line. Then, to mark the width of the neckline, I mark 1.3 centimeters out from the center. I then freehand a slightly teardrop-shaped line to mark the neckline. Fold the paper along the crease and cut out your template. It will fold over like so to make the bodice of the dress. I drew in the seam lines, which are half a centimetre throughout, though ignore the ones next to the neck hole as they're not right. There's also no seam allowance for the neck hole itself. Save your cutout from earlier. We will use it to draft the bib. Align it with the middle, then straighten the sides and you'll see where it'll be placed. Leave space above the seam allowance so it doesn't get caught in the waist seam though. On folded scrap paper, I trace round the cutout, then straighten the edge and cut out to make a bib shape. It'll get trimmed down later, but mine is 3.5 centimeters tall here. Next, I'll select a fabric to use. I have a slippery, drapey polyester here, which I'll combine later with a skirt of sheer netting, similar to this. I find the grain of my polyester and will trace my template on the grain, not the bias. I'm using a heat erasable pen so the marks aren't permanent. I'll draw all around the template, but I won't be cutting out the neck hole yet, just cut across the top points here. Before I cut, I apply fray check to these edges, not to the neck hole though. I've looked out a white version of the same polyester fabric to use for the bib and sleeves. I'll lay the bib on the grain and trace round it, then cut out roughly, leaving seam allowance. Let's draft the sleeves next. I want the shoulder width to be 5.5 centimeters to match the bodice. I leave a little space to the right of my paper to make space to draw the curve, then make 2 marks 5.5 centimeters apart. I repeat these higher up to connect into 2 parallel lines. I grab my Blythe body, she has a Lika-chan head on, and I try to work out how long the sleeves need to be. I take into account seam allowances and the dropped shoulder that I'll have from the bodice shape. I also want a bell-shaped gather at the cuff. I decide on 7 centimeters and mark that on my paper. Now I want to taper the sleeve out towards the cuff, so I'm adding extra width of 0.5 centimeter at each side of the sleeve. I freehand draw a curve on both sides. It starts straight before tapering in towards the original line. I cut along the lines drawn, fold in half, then trim off any uneven bits. Copy these measurements to make your own sleeves. I will use the same fabric as the bib to make these sleeves. Trace, fray check and cut 2 of them. Here are mine ready. Next I'll make the bib. I'm going to hand stitch on some lace decoration first. Then we'll overlay some mesh fabric before sewing along the outline, trimming and folding out. Here's my decorative lace and the mesh on top that'll let me neaten the outline. I've machine sewn round the U-shaped outline, leaving the top open. Now I will trim, snip the seam allowance and turn it through. I'll iron it gently, then hand stitch it to the bodice. Here it's done, and now I'll use another piece of fine mesh on top as I sew round the opening and neckline. It needs to be at least 8 by 8 centimeters. I traced round my template again on the back to sew along this line. Now I can trim away the excess and snip the seam allowance to let me turn the mesh through to the reverse side. I'll push out the corners and carefully iron it flat. I will make a gathered lace collar, cutting lace approximately twice the length of the opening. I gather it, then hand stitch in place. I've also added a narrow lace round the edge of the bib. Now that's all sewn down, I can trim away the excess mesh fabric from the back, leaving about 1 centimetre loose all round. Next, I'll attach the sleeves. Right sides together, joining both along the 5.5 centimetre edge. Here they're both sewn, and I'll fold the seam allowance towards the bodice and top stitch here. Using the same lace as the bib, I hand stitch these onto the sleeves before we gather the cuffs. Using a running stitch to gather the cuffs a little, I've cut some pretty elastic to about 5 centimetres to use as cuffs. I'll leave some elastic overhanging each side as I go, and will pull the elastic as I sew, so it will gather the cuffs more. I align right sides together so the elastic can turn over, leaving a neat hem. Hopefully you can see that here. The elastic now has the neat edge showing. The next thing to do is fold the bodice like this, and pin before sewing up the bodice side, then along to close the sleeves. I'm going to trim away a little of the seam allowance and snip the seam allowance curve of the armpit. I'm afraid my head covered this a bit. Hopefully you can see there's a little turn at the armpits where we will attach our skirt. I then turn both sleeves right side out and look at the bodice so far. I've no idea how it fits yet, but we'll measure where the skirt needs to go and calculate the rest from there. Well, it does fit nicely, thank goodness, and now I can make the skirt. My waistline is 11 centimetres, so I'll make the skirt 16 wide and 10 centimetres long. To the bottom of that, I'll attach a section 24 centimetres wide by 6 centimetres long, making a tiered layer. I'll pre-hem the bottom of that layer too, before it's attached. I'll sew a gathering stitch at the top of both sections to pull them in so they match the width of the piece above. I used the same fabric as the bodice and fray checked all the edges. There's a simple folded hem here, and you can see the gathers are in place. Now I'll join the two sections before sewing it to the bodice. The skirt's attached. Now I'm planning the sheer overskirt. I decided to use this soft tulle netting and will cut it 20 by 15 centimetres before sewing lace onto the bottom and gathering to match the waistline. Actually scratch that. Make it 24 centimetres wide, otherwise it will be smaller than the width of the skirt underneath. I machine stitched this lace on. You could use straight lace or even layer up different types. And I've gathered the waist to match the existing one. I'll hand stitch it in place. Here it's done, and I've wrapped and sewn about 5mm around the opening at the back on each side so it's neat. Finally, let's close up the back of the dress. Right sides in, line up both the over and underskirts, pin them, and then sew, leaving about 4 or 5 centimeters open at the top. Here we have my model again. I think it's a good fit. I like the tiered underskirt and the lace details on the bodice. It ended up looking pretty close to my first sketch too. I finished the closure with a little fine Velcro. I'll add a link to the stuff I use in the description. Yes, I'm just happy that it fits. The sleeves are really cute, the polyester fabric wasn't too slippery to work with. So one last thing I want to do is dye it in tea to mute the colours a little. Let's hope I don't ruin it now. Here it's drying in the sunshine. The tea did colour the sleeves and bib mostly, not so much the lace, but I'm happy with it. Let's get it on to my Simply Delight Blythe doll, and before we see the final shots, I really want to share and thank some of the talented crafters who have supported the channel and shared their projects with me on Instagram. Patty's Dolls and More was incredibly quick in trying out my recent Smart Doll crop vest pattern. I love the fabric she used and I think it looks great on her Smart Doll. Thank you, Patty. Grifsu1 put together this gorgeous outfit using my Blythe collared shirt pattern. I just can't get over how great all the colours are together. Those trousers are just incredible. I love all your work, thank you, Susan. Eclectic Wandering treated her new Smart Doll Yoshimi to a mori skirt using my pattern. The fabric is beautiful and it looks so good with the rest of her outfit too. Thanks, Tracy. The lovely Alice in Smart Doll Land got right to work on my dress form pattern too. Her Instagram is delightful. I loved her Frozen inspired dress. She also made herself a fantastic tartan handbag using my free Smart Doll pattern. Thank you, Alice. Louisville828 has shared her first ever custom Blythe. She even made the wig too. I think her French fairy is wonderful and her hair is awesome. Thank you, Tulworth. And finally, Snooty Cow, who found success in using the Culture Japan free tea pattern, thanks to both Sam Sally Under Orange and myself's tutorials. I can't wait to see her special fabric, and you should check out her amazing knitting too. Thanks, Candice. Please tag me and use the hashtag Beth Ramsden Crafts to be featured in future videos. I love seeing what you do with my patterns and tutorials. Thanks for sticking around. Now let's go enjoy the final shots and I'll see you again soon. Bye!